I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics and Fantastic Four Grand Design.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And today we're talking about cinema speculation, Tarantino's new book, minimally a memoir. Like there is a minimal amount of autobiographical material, and then the rest is like a Rex Reed book or something. Is like he's been doing like the interview circuit. He was on Howard Stern.
Oh, nice.
To. So I kind of have, like reading the book and that interview kind of like melded. So there's some things,
I can't wait to hear him be on the talk show circuit about this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, speaking of Howard Stern, it kind of reminded me of They Call Me Baba Booey, because it's kind of like it read as if he started writing one kind of book and then kind of was like, yeah, whatever, and then started writing a different kind of book. And then was like, how about if I just like put
them two together?
Because like Baba Booey, he had his like sort of memoir, and then he also had every so often there'd be a bunch of like top 10 lists, a bunch of like nonsensical top 10 lists. So it was kind of like he had a book that was going to be top 10 lists, and
I gotta read that.
Now the thing is, I say that as sort of a criticism, but now I'm thinking back, like that's kind of a criticism Tarantino's gotten his whole career of like, you just took two different half-baked ideas and put them together, like From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah.
Or, Grindhouse or something. And of course, in all of those cases, I love all of those things.
Love them.
But they were sort of criticized that way of like, that you didn't have enough for like one thing, so you took two,
And, yeah, because like that first chapter, you're right, it's him like talking about his like falling in love with the movie.
Yeah, that's like what sells the book. Like that was probably like the sample that he sent to the publisher.
Yeah.
And so the publisher thinks they're getting like Quentin Tarantino's life story, but then he does the hard left turn, and it's
immediately.
It's like, I'm telling you about my childhood where I spent all kinds of time at the movies, and that like the movies were like the best thing in my life, and then you think you're going to see the rest of his life, but you're just going to see more movie talk.
And then he has a great memory too, where he he knows where he saw the film, and he knows like it's like the holdover from that first chapter where he's like his mom's taking him with him on dates, and who what they're seeing, usually like a double bill. The double bills, I'd be so exhausted to see those these days.
It explained a lot about his filmography. It explained a lot about like the content, about the subject matter, the style. It's like, oh, okay, so this is the origin of Grindhouse. It's like, okay, he went to these sort of Grindhouse things when he was a kid. It was so much fun. And then like when he was a teenager, he'd kind of sneak into some of them, and so now he's given you a double feature.
I love that. And like we were saying, he's like keeps name dropping all these movies in each chapter, and I'm like, I hope there's an index at the end.
The movies that he kind of focuses on, it's like, okay, here's a chapter, I'm going to talk about this movie, that movie. And then the title, Cinema Speculation, is kind of like, there's like a couple chapters where he's like, what if this? Like, what if Brian De Palma directed Taxi Driver? That was one chapter. Oh, I guess you didn't get there.
I haven't got there yet.
What if Brian De Palma directs Taxi Driver? So he has like little like what ifs. What if, what if, this guy would have been cast in this thing instead of that guy? A little bit of that.
I was loving, I think it might be the first hard left. It might go right to Bullet, maybe. It feels like. And I love his take on, he's appreciative of Steve McQueen, like recognizing his superstardom, or his like how he chooses material. I thought that was fascinating.
I'd always hear about that as like a negative. That like, Steve McQueen, you don't want to work with him. Like he was the worst, and because it would be like one of the, like I'd read some article or something with some producer, and he was saying when you hire Steve McQueen, all you're doing is renting his naked body, because you have to provide him with underwear, clothes, a place to live. Like you have to provide every single thing. So,
there's actors now, I think, that like put that in their rider too, to like you get to keep your costuming.
Right, yeah.
I get to keep that priest's costume or whatever. Like,
as far as like his recommendations, like I'm kind of like, like things will pop up where I'll be like, I gotta check it. And so like, he does spend a lot of time with Brian De Palma, and like Brian De Palma, that was like that was my dad's favorite director. Was Brian De Palma. And I was just thinking, like, I never got to see a Brian De Palma movie with my dad, like, unless you count, like, Scarface. But we weren't really watching it together. Him and my mom, like, they rented it, and they were watching it, and I just happened to be in the room, and getting, scarred. Like Tarantino talks about, all these movies that he'd see that his mom would take him to that, like, nobody else's mom would take their kid to see, and that he was kind of popular from it in school because he could tell them about all these crazy, tell the other kids about these crazy movies. But then also some of the parents would be like, "I don't want you hanging around with that guy," and like I was thinking of that because it's like, it was just like a different time, and like I remember like some of the crazy movies like my parents would be watching, on the VHS. And so he kind of got like the theater experience of that,
cool,
some of the crazy movies.
I would definitely.
Yeah, Scarface was probably the craziest movie that like I saw as a little kid, as my parents were watching it.
Somebody's getting chainsawed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't remember that part, so I thankfully was out of the room for that part because that part gives me the chills. Like even like watching it now when Raising Cain came out.
Oh yeah,
like my dad really wanted to see it. He was like, "Let's go see Raising Cain." And like it just looked so stupid to me from the commercial because it was like John Lithgow, fresh off of Harry and the Hendersons with like sunglasses and like giggling and stuff. And I'm like, Dad, I do not want to see this. So we didn't go see it.
It's like I think it's been reappraised.
Right, I know. I'm sure of it. And just De Palma in general, like. I mean, because when I was a kid, like, I didn't, the fact that he was my dad's favorite worked against them, And now it's like, now I understand that, De Palma and like, Carlito's Way and all that.
Oh, my God.
His insights into Tarantino, not my dad. Tarantino's insights into De Palma are interesting because he does, like, De Palma has, like, all these phases of his career where, like, but he talks about him, about, like, all those other guys of that generation being kind of like, the film brats or whatever, like being like super fans of film, and just knowing every little bit of trivia, but that De Palma was not. De Palma was like a regular nerd, mm-hmm. not a film nerd, not a comics nerd, but like a nerd where he's like super into science, and so you see that in his movies. His movies, like, if I had a critique of his work, is like the coldness.
It's
the
a little
distance,
cold, little cold.
Like everything kind of snaps into place when you sort of realize that he's a scientist, he's coming at it from a science angle, because then you think of, like, Tarantino mentions Carrie, like the blood in a bucket scene, like the prom king and queen scene. I think of like Mission Impossible, like that is like just this like scientifically kind of like put together in a lab kind of thing, and the action scenes in Carlito's Way, where it's like
his one-ers. Remember the one-er where at the end where Pacino's hiding from those goons at the train station, and it goes on forever, and you're like, this is fucking great. How do they block that? Or like, I would forget. I'm like, hey Brian, I can't remember I'm supposed to hide here or whatever. I heard a story where like it was when Pacino was doing this. Remember, like they're playing cat and mouse, like getting on
and they're on the escalator and stuff.
And there's a part where he has to get on the subway while they're back and forth, and he was so tired. He got on the subway and just left.
Went home.
He went home. And they're like, where the fuck did he go? He just left. He was,
I gotta get home. I'm taking the F train.
He's like,
I'm taking the F train home. I'm tired, bro.
Hoo-ah. He's like, I think a flamethrower this place. He's like, I like how instead of a woman, he's like a grenade blew up in his hands to blow his eyes out. He's like, that's what he's like, what happened to that guy? He's like, he was playing with it. He was juggling grenades. I wanted to be in Bottom and Bailey. He's like, clown colleges. It's like two hardest colleges to get into: Harvard and Bottom and Bailey.
The autobio stuff in there, Tarantino, like, I mean, he's got daddy issues or whatever.
Yeah.
He's got father hunger or whatever. Because like, he had a, like, he never knew his dad. And then he had like a stepfather for a while, and then he had like sort of a series of like mom's boyfriends, varying degrees of connection to them and stuff. But like the movies were like the common thread. They sort of take him to the movies and stuff. Like he's told the story of like the one time he almost met his dad, where like his dad, he was at like a coffee shop. It was, I don't know how many years ago, but he was, famous. Like this guy, Tony Tarantino has like
Never
never made any attempt to like see him until he became famous, and then he said he was at a coffee shop and like wouldn't even turn around, like he wouldn't even look at him, like Quentin wouldn't even like turn around or look at, like the way he tells the story, it's like he was seething, and like you can just feel like there's just like so much hurt. Like he would probably, if he would allow himself, he would probably like start crying, but like he just like can't allow himself to do that. Tony wanted really bad to get like the approval of, this famous movie maker who happens to be his son, and Quentin didn't want to give him the time of day, so he like refused to even like turn around, and like he just kind of with his back to him just kind of like waved him away and stuff. Because so I can imagine like the emotion that's good. So like you kind of see it's like there's various characters in his movies who have, like Bill is one of the characters that has like father issues, and they talk about like the series of surrogate fathers that that he had, and like you see that with Quentin. I mean, obviously like his stepfather, who is like surrogate father isn't the right word, because like your stepfather like is your father, like he was his dad, for that time, but the mom's boyfriends. But then it's like you see like Harvey Keitel and like all these like different people who've come into his life like career wise, who like he kind of would sort of try to make into like a surrogate father role.
Harvey Keitel in Reservoir Dogs, he's like, just crack that gun down over the bridge of their nose.
you gotta listen to the Stern interview, because he talks about like going on a hunting trip with Steven Spielberg and John Milius and and Zemeckis. I think Zemeckis was there too. It was through like Milius's gun club. Like Milius took them all duck hunting, and like the story that he's telling, that Tarantino's telling, this was like, right after Pulp Fiction.
Wow.
And he was kind of like, red hot, and so like,
welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club, exactly. But like, when he tells this story, like the story hinges on Milius kind of having these like paternal feelings towards, like, because they're shooting at ducks, and then like Quentin like or shooting at like clay pigeons, I guess at first, and Quentin like hits it or whatever right up. And Milius is like, the kid's a natural, and like, and Quentin was just like sort of beaming, having like one of his like heroes. That was, he took that and used that as a line in Django Unchained. That's what King Schultz says when Django does the sort of first like snipe.
Okay, talk about like just using everything from your.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like that kind of stuff was super interesting, and and that's where the book starts off, and it's kind of like, I don't think Tarantino wanted to tell, like, of course, that's what, when you read a book like this, that's what you want to read about the person. But, like, I don't think he wanted to write that kind of book, but he was probably, a canny enough storyteller to understand that if I want people to read this, cinema criticism book, that I put this sort of like Roger Ebert's book, or Rex Reed or whatever, I got to hook them in with, so that was kind of like the hook to get you in and kind of give like a context to what the remainder of the book was going to sort of be, these critical essays.
And it was all, what I was popping from too? Those interviews like that he had within the chapters where he talks to like the director. I'm like, man, he was asking some good questions.
Yeah, that is nice. The sort of behind that, like where it's like, I slipped this question to Scorsese. He had a lot of questions for Scorsese and stuff. And in the De Palma chapter, it's like, because De Palma, like one of his first movies, and like his first like success was these two movies in a row that he did with Robert De Niro, two comedies. Like he started out as like the sort of hippie comedy movie maker, and they started De Niro, and so Quentin asked him like, Quentin asked Robert De Niro, did you and Brian De Palma have a falling out because you did those two movies? They were really good experiences.
Was it a birthday party or something like that?
No, it was called Greetings and Hi Mom.
Okay.
They were sequel. Like Hi Mom was a sequel to Greetings, and then like you guys like never worked again. For decades.
Wow,
like, did you have a falling out or what? And he's like, no, we didn't have a falling out. And he said, all through the 70s we'd get together for coffee and stuff. It's just that like
the project.
Yeah, his directorial career blew up, and he was like the hottest director for a while, and De Niro's career was heating up too. So they just kind of they're separate things.
There's a great De Palma documentary, if you haven't seen it, by Noah Baumbach.
Okay.
It's just called De Palma.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that was really good. There was like I watched a bunch of them in a row. Like there was the De Palma documentary, there was the Milius documentary. Like,
well, I haven't seen the Milius documentary.
all these great filmmaker documentaries. With the De Palma thing, he was saying that De Palma made this very like calculated choice that like, okay, I can become like the new Hitchcock, which of course you see in his movies, like,
yeah.
But that like it was like a career move. It was like, I can corner this market, making like the classy horror movies. I can become the master of the macabre or whatever, and so that became his bread and butter for a while.
Dude, we gotta cover maybe during next Halloween Body Double. Mm-hmm. That movie, that's one of my favorite De Palma ones. John Lithgow too in Raising Cain.
Yeah, I gotta watch. I've still never seen Raising Cain, but like reading this book made me think of like my dad and his fandom of De Palma. So I'm like, I gotta make up for lost time and see Raising Cain.
I'm a John Lithgow fan. I know some people think he's a quadruple Van Damme, but like I'm into his shtick.
It's like about like what if De Palma directed Taxi Driver. De Palma had the reason he does a chapter on like what if De Palma had directed Taxi Driver is because De Palma could have. De Palma is the one who like discovered Paul Schrader's script. He was like Paul Schrader was like a critic, and then they'd hang out and play chess together, and then like they met for like an interview or whatever, and then they became friends. Paul Schrader's like, oh, by the way, I wrote a movie script too, and he's like, oh God, this every like friendship he has sort of eventually gets to that point. But then he did read it and was like, yeah, this is a great movie, and kind of got the ball rolling for it, and didn't ultimately do it. And he says the reason he didn't do it is he didn't think it was commercial enough, and it wasn't a commercial enough script. But like, Tarantino's like, this is. Like revenge-omatics, like the revenge.
I love
movie.
that term he uses. I'm like, I started using that.
Yeah, that they were so red hot after Death Wish, and it got me thinking because like he says how like Scorsese didn't like Taxi Driver wasn't like something that he wasn't involved, like it fell in his lap kind of, but when he read it he like fell in love with the material and felt like it like really spoke to him and spoke for him. But it kind of was like we talked about with like The Godfather, where it was kind of like a job. Yeah, it was a job, but it was like the perfect you make your masterpiece.
We mentioned that with Halloween too.
And it was like it was like I never thought of it this way, but it was kind of like the reason it got green lit and all this stuff was because of Death Wish. It's like, okay, let's make a movie like Death Wish.
Yeah.
And like, it's obvious now looking, but like I just never thought of those two going together. But it's like, oh yeah, it's like a Death Wish. And so it kind of got me thinking, because in a later chapter, Tarantino's talking about Rocky and how much he loves the Rocky series.
I can't wait for that.
And I was thinking like, oh yeah, like Scorsese, it's like, okay, Death Wish comes out. Now let me do my Death Wish.
Of course.
And then Rocky comes out and it's like, let me do my Rocky, and it's Raging Bull. You know what I mean? Like Scorsese's Death Wish makes you forget that it was even like there even was a Death Wish. And it's same with Raging Bull. Like Raging Bull is kind of like, it's not it's not on the same planet as Rocky. Yeah. About Rocky, he mentions Jack Kirby.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was an interesting name drop to and of course, like I mean, I heard the name Jack Kirby in a Quentin Tarantino script before I ever like
Oh yeah, me too. I think the first time I heard it was in fucking Crimson Tide.
Yeah, it was in Crimson Tide. Was the first time I heard.
95.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, Jack Kirby's Silver Surfer is the best Silver Surfer. That thing. So like, he's a comics fan. He's a Kirby fan. And then in
True Romance.
True Romance. Yeah, in True Romance, the comic that Christian Slater is describing is a Kirby comic. It's like it's a Jack Kirby comic and then a Dick Ayers comic. Like Jack Kirby created like the framing sequence of it, and then Dick Ayers did sort of like the stuff in between. But it's more or less a Kirby comic.
When we're out in Hollywood, Tarantino's going to do a adaptation of Jack Kirby the Epic comic.
Yeah, hey, maybe that'll be his final film.
That'd be the shit. Who would he cast as? Kirby.
Sam Levine would be Jack Kirby, because he kind of played Jack Kirby in Inglourious Bastards. He plays Jack Kirby was Private Kurtzberg. He played Private Hirschberg. He looks like Jack Kirby. He's got he had the same kind of attitude and everything. He would be Jack Kirby. Like, you'd have to have a couple different Jack Kirbys, for Jack Kirby: The Epic Life of the King of Comics movie. But yeah, Quentin, call me. We can, in spite of the things I said about your sad daddy issues, give me a call. It's funny the stuff he's talking about loving, because it does kind of like you see like Quentin Tarantino, the child, in it, because he's like talks about how much he loved the Fonz, and so then that made him go see Lords of Flatbush with Henry Winkler and Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, Lords of Flatbush.
He loved Rocky, and he said, if you can only imagine what it was like in the 70s, a crowd seeing in the theater, seeing Rocky for the first time, they went insane. They went insane, and like. And it's funny, and so he was just like a huge Stallone fan from then on, and he loved like Paradise Alley and stuff.
Oh my god!
But he was talking about, because like I always thought of Rocky, because like I saw Rocky 3 first. That was the first I saw that in the theater. That was the first Rocky movie I saw, where it's like so triumphant and everything.
Oh my god!
So then the first Rocky, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of a bummer because he loses the fight.
Yeah.
Again. But he was saying like, in the 70s, that was like a pump your fist happy ending, because like every movie up to that point, you would expect like going into Rocky, you'd expect, oh yeah, Rocky's going to die. He's going to die in the ring. He's going to get like that, because that's the way a 70s movie would end. And so he said the fact that
he survived,
and he gets in there and like, kicks Apollo Creed's ass, but then like loses on the judges, on the judges tally, but that he like, really, which is kind of like Raging. It's kind of like Raging Bull. Raging Bull has that same kind of sequence in it, but that was like getting the Olympic gold medal or something in a 70s movie. He said like everybody was so like excited that like it had like a happy ending.
But that's like Stallone gets a little juice, and then he's like, we're going to make Rocky 2, but this time Rocky's going to win.
I mean, Tarantino said he likes Rocky 2 even better. And he feels like Rocky 2 was kind of like doubly autobiographical, because Rocky 1 is autobiographical because he's like, this like schlub, this nothing actor who's trying to get something going and, against all odds has like...
Someone tell me that too, where she's like, he wrote it. She'd be like, he wrote it too. And like, I'm like...
and that was always the joke of like, he found that script in the back seat of the cab he was driving.
Of course,
he did not, but it's like, I mean, he plays dumb, like he that's his persona, is like, oh, I'm just some dope, but he's a smart guy.
Oh, he definitely is, and he's a great actor too. He got not like
for Rocky 2. He was saying Rocky 2 was like doubly autobiographical because it has those elements like. It's got still Rocky's like a loser again. He's back on the bottom. And Stallone's like 2 movies prior to Rocky 2 were both flops. Paradise Alley was the second one, and then another one called Fist.
I remember that one.
Where he plays like a Jimmy Hoffa kind of character. So he had these 2 flops, and so now he's got to like stage, his comeback. But then he was also saying like, Apollo Creed's character in Rocky 2 was also autobiographical because he's like, Apollo is just like incensed about how like in all the newspapers and stuff they're talking about like what a loser he is and stuff like that, and like Tarantino saying like that was Stallone in his like mansion yelling about the bad reviews Paradise Alley was getting, and so he he had something to prove, but he said that was his like he likes Rocky 2 even better than Rocky, but he was saying like after that he said like Rocky 3 and 4 he was saying they're basically just comic books. He said they're like, and he said, and the guys, the guys he fights could have been designed by Jack Kirby. And like,
did you pop?
Yeah, I was like, oh,
I didn't get that.
Yeah, my eyes open for that one. And
they bugged out. They do like the quadruple eye.
And I'm kind of like, how's that a bad thing?
Yeah, this book. Oh my
good.
God.
Rocky 3 is the one like that. That's my starting point, and I loved it. Like I ate it up. And
all the Rockies.
Yeah, all the Rockies are good, and like the Creed series is great too.
Love it.
But like, it's like Rocky 3 is still like right here because that's like to me that's Rocky. The other stuff is kind of like, oh, here's some Rocky prequels, but Rocky because it's got Mr. T. I was like the biggest Mr. T fan as a kid.
We love Mr. T.
And then it's like the Rocky statue. Like the Rocky statue is like a holy relic in the city of Philadelphia. Like it's like like so it's got all it's got all this and Hulk Hogan, and then Rocky on the Muppets. Where they take actual footage from Sylvester Stallone's Muppet appearance and act like it's like Rocky on the Muppets. Jeez. So like, that was and like I also like I love like the '80s part 3s. How they're like the glossy ones, and Rocky 3 is so glossy. Adrian Talia Shire, who's in the first 2 movies is supposed to be like Mousy or whatever. She is like a glamour queen.
Got the wizard helmet hair. Yeah. He's like, Adrian, he's like, I'm going to show you what a real man looks like. What a real man is.
That's such a great scene.
What a great... it's a promo on
It's Rocky. Funny because, like, seeing that movie as a kid, they shoot the Rocky statue from down below, pointing up, and it looks like it's the size of the Statue of Liberty. And then you see it in person. It's like it's outside of the art museum in Philly, and it's shorter than me. So watching it,
Hercules.
Yeah, it's like they had it like up on a table. They got like it's all this like.
When you said it was shooting up, I thought it was like Stallone had like an Easter egg where it's like his dick is hanging out under.
Well, they like shoot it from below, and it's like and then they shoot it from above, pointing down, like it's like up, like there's the head of Rocky and his fists, and then the clouds, and then Independence Hall or whatever.
It's like the Easter egg. Somebody looks up my truck.
He says the sequel, Rocky 3 and Rocky 4, are like comic books. He said they're more like trailers than movies, and he said they feature opponents who look like they were designed by Jack Kirby, and then
oh my god,
and then he also does like another comics name check where he says it's like Superman versus Muhammad Ali comic book. He said it's so like. And again, like I'm like, but and he's saying all this stuff as like critiques of them. But
You're like, this is the shit.
Yeah.
You'll see me at the art museum in Philadelphia. I'm like peeking up Rocky's drawings.
He talks about Rocky 2 being the best one. I think I've maybe seen Rocky 2 once.
Dude, we should do a full-on like assault on the Rocky series.
I watched the whole series like a little while back, like maybe a year or 2 ago. Watched the whole series all the way through, and I think that was the only time I saw Rocky 2 was in that viewing.
Okay.
And then like I think it might have been the only time I saw Rocky 1 from beginning to end, because it was one of those things. It was on TV all the time, and I'd catch like a little bit of it here and there, but I don't think I ever sat down and watched the whole thing from start to finish until then.
Dude, I'm gonna do that too. I gotta hit him from the beginning, because like I remember too. They'd be on television. You'd be like homesick from school, and it's like, it's the middle of Rocky 3 and or Rocky 4. He's like training in that barn in a leather jacket. Mm-hmm. It's like he doesn't need steroids like Ivan Drago.
There's this one chapter where he's talking about this director that he was like that he was like a huge fan of, that like nobody else cares about, or anything. Like he's sort of somebody he was like a big fan of, and he was saying that he like he started out as like a writer for like Tower of Frankenstein magazine or whatever.
Holy shit.
And he was saying and I think he like died of suicide.
Oh my god.
And so, but he's talking about this guy and how much he loved like like that 1 or 2 movies that this guy made, and then and he says like he wrote Tower of Frankenstein and or Famous Monsters of Filmland, one of those magazines, and that he wrote this like great article about Bela Lugosi's morphine addiction and death and stuff. And so I'm like, oh man, I gotta hunt that down. I gotta hunt down that magazine and find it. And then you turn the page, and he's got like a little reproduction of.
It doesn't get any. Are you kidding me?
This reproduction of that article, like you can read it. It's a little hard to read because like Famous Monsters and Tower of Frankenstein are like this big, and it's shrunken down in book. But like I was like, this is a book.
This is what I'm talking. It's been delivering on every facet, like we mentioned, like his interviews and stuff.
It's a page turner. It's right up my alley.
We later on the show one of these days we got to do that Shadow Company script, because it got me even more in the mood for it, because Walter Hill pops up a ton in like this first quarter, and he's the producer of the Shadow Company.
Okay, well that's another thing, because we're in another video we're going to talk about that Alan Moore Twilight of the superheroes, but like I did that. I'm like, what other thing can I like give this treatment? And I'm thinking some of these like unused scripts that we've been talking about, maybe do like a little, little show and tell, little animated little thing for some highlights, for some of these.
It's Shadow Company is Shane Black writing,
Yeah.
John Carpenter directing, Walter Hill producing. Are you fucking kidding me, Tom?
So
for Universal Pictures.
So that's our cinema speculation.
Yeah.
Our cinema speculation is like taking these unused scripts and making little things out of them.
The first quarter, Walter Hill's been popping up in every one, and I'm like, Tom, there's a great Walter Hill's first movie is on Tubi. It's Hard Times.
Hard Times, okay.
It's got Charles Bronson as the lead.
I'm thinking Hard Time on Planet Earth with Sensei John Kreese, Martin Cove, where he's got this like little like flying robot that gives him sass. And he looks like the Predator in like the opening credits. He looks like the Predator, and then he turns into Martin Cove, and he doesn't turn into the Predator.
He went into his shell after getting taken over the barrel by fucking John Denver.
I think it was like a post John Denver project, so he's like, I'll take anything.
Yeah, he's like he tried to get his mojo, or he's like. He was like doing some extra like he's like I got get my testosterone.
Yeah, I just got my ass handed to me by John Denver. What am I doing wrong? Like he had a good long hard look in the mirror after that one.
Yeah, Denver's slapping him around.
He made a Denver omelet out of him.
He's like, I'm gonna crack your head like an egg and make a Denver omelet. He got slapped around. He's like crying.
I think about that Quentin Tarantino podcast that he does because Roger Avary, because he's like a screenwriter and a director too. Obviously not as successful.
He co-wrote Pulp Fiction.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Co-wrote like so they've been but they started out kind of like as like equals like just these two guys equals and maybe even Roger Avary was like his superior, like kind of like his boss or something. He might have been like the manager. Quentin soon like surpassed, and then they're making kind of like low budget movies at the same time, and then Quentin becomes this huge, but they're like obviously still best friends, but like they talk, and like it's fun hearing them talk, and it's real interesting, but then at the end of each episode, Gala like chimes in for like 2 seconds, and you're like riveted, like you don't want to hear from these two fossils. It's like, and it's just so funny because because she's like the producer of the show. I'm sure she's
Roger's daughter.
Yeah, Roger's daughter. I'm sure she like pitched the show where she's like, "Look, guys, I'll handle all the technical stuff. I'll put it all together, this and that." But it is like you don't want to hear from those. Like she and it's like
steals the show.
Yeah, but I guess it's like inconceivable to them for like. I'm not gonna make my daughter like the co-host, and I'm not gonna make my best friend's daughter the co-host, even though it's like she just has like the star power.
Definitely, I'm like
because her opinions are like it's like a different perspective from them.
Yeah,
and they're interesting and they're like well observed and like they need to just make her a co-host or maybe even make it like her show and they're the side and it does like. Like get those two guys out of the picture. We want to hear from her. It's just like two guys who are like slowly turning into ash
and blow away. There's like two skeletons.
For like Quentin Tarantino, a guy who understands film and this and understands Hollywood and stuff. For like I think it's just like so obvious to everybody that listens to that podcast that it's like you need to bring her into it more. Yeah, she needs to be because it's kind of like those guys talk for like an hour and a half and give their opinions, and then she comes in with her opinion. It's like a completely different perspective, real interesting, and like she needs to be there kind of the whole time and
she's
kind
more on the after show, I think too.
Yeah, the after show is more like her thing. But like it needs like I understand what they're saying. It's like. We are two, directors and writers and whatever. But it's like, in the world of podcasting, it's all about the ear, and the ear is craving more. Yeah, you can tell a star. Yeah.
The Quentin and Roger. It's so awesome. Like first of all, Quentin buying all the entire stock of video archives and keeping the the videos and the shelves is like he's a man of my own
Yeah,
heart. I would want to do the same.
And he's got like a replica of it, like he's got like a room that's built to look like video archive.
Yeah, and he has the entire stock of
Yeah,
it.
that's kind of a cool luxury. And like I was kind of thinking of that, like, oh, you know, like what would my equivalent? And of course it would be like, oh, you set up a little comics shop in your house, which is kind of what my basement is.
That's
but
awesome.
then I'm thinking like, yeah, an arcade. Yeah, you know, that's a kind of a classic one. Make it look like Starport Arcade from the Neshaminy Mall.
Holy shit.
Or Champions Arcade from the Roosevelt Mall.
Wow, or Spaceport from the Westmoreland Mall, or Tilt.
Tilt.
There was this guys walking around with the quarters in their belt.
So yeah, this has been our Quentin Tarantino's cinema speculation
Yep.
episode of the Total Recall Show. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli and on Instagram at Tom_Scioli.
You can follow the show on Instagram at total_recall_show.
And please stop by my Patreon and check it out. Go to patreon.com, search Tom Scioli, and you can see different comics projects I've been working on over the years.
Follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.